London can often be a scary place. When the sun sets and the night comes alive, it pays to keep your wits about you. Most of us think we're safe on these streets, save for the odd phone snatcher and the weirdo that sits next to you on the bus. But what if the scariest thing out there in this vast, sprawling city wasn't the living, it was the dead? Today on Macabre London, it's time to light your lantern because we're going on a ghost hunt. Welcome back to Macabre London, or if you're new here, then hi, I'm Nikki Druce, your host with a silent G, and today we're delving into a good old-fashioned ghost story. Now, last time we wrapped up our Jack the Ripper series, but I couldn't leave the East End without exploring one particular pub, which is so haunted, the bar staff refuse to work alone. Over the course of October, I'll be doing what I love most, chasing ghosts, and I'll be bringing you a few shorter tales of terror and intrigue to tickle your spooky pickle and give you a fright, all in the name of Halloween. Now, if you're new here and this is your first time listening to or watching Macabre London, then welcome, it's lovely to have you here. If you want to get more of the show, I'd love for you to join me and the rest of the Ghoul Gang on patreon.com/Macabre London to be part of the exclusive club. It really is the best way to support the show to keep it going, in return for extra bonus content such as spooky bedtime stories and a show after the show called Pod Mortem, where I discuss my own thoughts and theories and all the behind the scenes investigating that ends up on the cutting room floor. So if that sounds like something you'd like, head on over and I'll see you there. But now it's time to light your lantern and grab your EMF reader because, friends, we're going ghost hunting. If walls could talk in London, you would constantly be assaulted by a cacophony of noise. The countless years of history that are soaked into the fabric of the many buildings are sometimes ingrained so well that the people who made these stories refuse to leave, even long after they're dead. In one particular building in the East End, you'd be forgiven for thinking you'd emerged from a time machine, as not much has changed inside. Open the doors of the 10 Bells pub in Spitalfields and you'd be forgiven for thinking this was Victorian England. Sure, the beer taps are all brightly illuminated nowadays, and you can't escape the horrifying sounds of Ed Sheeran on the pub's sound system, but step further into the belly of this relic of a building, and you can feel the people who once used this place as an escape from their daily lives. The 10 Bells stands at the corner of Commercial Street and Fournier Street in Spitalfields, and has been there since the 1700s. It first opened its doors to the public under the name of the 8 Bells Ale House. The origins of the name come from its neighbouring location next door to a church. The holy neighbour of the imposing Christ Church was a jarring juxtaposition of a stoic behemoth of a building. This ghostly white brick house of God would have stood out like a sore thumb next to the grimy brick buildings, soon to be blackened by smog when the Industrial Revolution rolled round and the many factories in the area began pumping out fumes which left a literal stain on the landscape. Christchurch and the pub popped up almost simultaneously. Where there was God, there was sin, and after spending a morning sitting in church repenting, by lunchtime people were ready for a pint. The 8 Bells in the tower of Christchurch gave the pub its name, but when 2 more bells were added in the 1850s, in order to be factually correct, the pub also had to update its name, so it became the 10 Bells. The name it's stuck with for over a century. At that time, Spitalfields was a bustling, crowded neighbourhood. Narrow streets and dark alleyways teemed with market traders, artisans, labourers, and the city's growing underclass, which were the biggest spenders when it came to the trade of booze. The 10 Bells was one of the few places where the community could gather, drink gin and beer, and share the small comforts of daily life. and forget for a moment about the many horrors they had to face. But where there was drink, there was vice. And soon the pub became a hub of illegal gambling and a place to pick up women of the evening. Now, I won't go into the perils of being a Victorian sex worker, as we've just covered that in quite a lot of detail in the Jack the Ripper series, but it's safe to say the women who worked there were always on their toes. However, the 10 Bells pub worked as a bit of a refuge for sex workers, and it seemed that unlike other establishments, they were welcomed. As long as they were buying drinks, or men were buying them drinks, then they were allowed to stay. After all, if people knew where to find these girls and they were safe in the pub under the watchful eye of the staff, then it was a better deal all round for everyone. The pub made more money, the girls were safer, and they brought in patrons who wanted to spend the evening in the company of a lady. Some women became regulars, and if punters had a favourite girl, they knew they could find them there, so all round, it operated as a well-oiled machine. And some say on a quiet evening, you can still hear the patrons who once were chatting away to giggling women as they pretend to be interested in the hopes of making a sale. In 1888, the 10 Bells found itself entwined in the case I've just finished, the Whitechapel murders. As the washout summer rolled into winter during 1888, the local residents sat around and pored over the papers, some reading them out loud to their illiterate friends, and people started to twitchily eye their fellow patrons in the pub. On September the 8th, 1888, Annie Chapman, the second victim of Jack the Ripper, was drinking in the 10 Bells before her death a short stroll away. Had Jack been in the pub that evening and watched Annie leave? Had he maybe been watching her whilst she drank in there on a regular basis, learned her movements, and eventually decided to strike her down? Mary Jane Kelly, the final and most brutal of all Jack's victims, lived close by. And again, maybe Jack watched her working in the pub and worked out when would be best to strike. Now, owing to its connections to the infamous murder case, during the 1970s, the owners made a controversial decision. In a time when attractions like the London dungeons were becoming popular and interest in all things Victorian was en vogue, the pub got a new name, the Jack the Ripper. Inside the pub, the decision was made to really lean into the one-time patrons and to very pointedly glamorise the murders. The whole pub was returned to its Victorian grandeur, not that it had really changed much anyway, but questionable decisions were made in terms of decor. Even the post-mortem photos of the women were proudly displayed for patrons to see. And it seemed as though people had forgotten that these were real women who had horrific things happen to them, and here they were being rolled out as some gruesome cheap trick to lure people in for a drink. Now, the pub did remain that way for a number of years, but when people began to question the validity of the pub's claims, they were saying that Jack was a regular patron and it was definitely where he drank and chose his victims, questions started to flood in to the owners. Why were they doing this? If it was just to make money, then it was wildly disrespectful. And so after plenty of campaigning, the post-mortem photos slowly came down. The decor was cleaned up, and the pub regained its name of the 10 Bells once more, ironically returning it to being more authentic. As soon as the pub returned to its recognisable form, it seemed the ghostly residents also started to return. But if you fancy doing some ghost hunting yourself this spooky season, then I have some good news. You don't even need to leave home to do it. Fancy having a wander around a haunted home whilst engaging your brain with some taxing tasks and gripping games? Well, allow me to introduce you to Wolf Escape Games. They have a couple of fabulous titles that will keep you going all October long, and they're great for gathering the ghouls for a game night like no other. In Hallows Hill, you get to explore an abandoned mansion with a tumultuous past, and let me tell you, this game had me so intrigued I couldn't put it down. It's the right amount of creepy and fun, and you can play on your own or in a group if you need someone to hold your hand. But if solving crimes is more your thing, then you can embark on your own Victorian murder mystery and see if you can earn your detective stripes. Wolf Escape Games offer an online Victorian murder mystery called Phantom's Hour, which allows you to see how you'd fare solving a case. This game is Sherlock Holmes themed, and you get to solve clues, gather evidence at a crime scene, and get the old brain box ticking with puzzles to solve, which let you take the lead on a murder mystery. Wolf Escape Games creates immersive cinematic online escape room adventures that unfold in a way that really gets under your skin and will leave you thinking about it for days, if not weeks afterwards. If you love things which are on the darker side, solving cryptic clues and that rush you get when everything finally clicks together, then these escape games are for you. Also, these games are so reasonably priced and well worth it. They're so beautifully made and well thought out that you're going to want to play them all, and that's where I can help you with a fantastic discount. So if you're ready to try something different and have an evening in like no other, then head to wolfescapegames.com and use the code Macabre30 for a fantastic 30% off games and gift cards, and these really do make a fabulous gift for that person who you don't know what to get. They also do bundle deals too, so if you fancy the look of a few titles, which I know you will, I can't stress just how addictive and fun these games are, and once you've played one, you're going to want more. That's wolfescapegames.com, link in the show notes, and let me know what you think when you've played one. You're going to have a blast. Staff and patrons over decades have reported ghostly goings-on at the 10 Bells pub in the heart of Spitalfields. Some say these happen when the pub is lively and full, and others when the staff are on their own. Some staff members say that as soon as the living patrons have left, the dead ones emerge. It's like the night shift taking over. Objects have moved on their own across tables, pint jugs rattle from a sudden breeze which whips through the bar, cold gusts rattle up the stairs at the back of the pub, and doors have been known to rattle and handles twist, but no one is there. Footsteps have been heard along staircases long after closing time, and in the basement, where the beer barrels are stored, the knocking and clattering of metal can often be heard. But the most compelling of all is the sound of voices, can often be heard whispering in the bar after closing. But when staff walk in, everything goes quiet. It's as if they've interrupted a party they weren't invited to. One notable account comes from a cleaner in the 1990s. They had been tasked with an overnight deep clean, and so they were locked in the pub for the night. As they were done with cleaning the floors, they straightened themselves up. In front of them, through a doorway, was a mirror. When they looked into it, they saw themselves, but also a man stood behind them. Terrified, they stood gripped with fear that someone had broken in. They watched and saw the face evaporate into thin air. Needless to say, they didn't finish the job and left straight away. One particularly dangerous haunting happened in the form of a poltergeist, a noisy ghost. The spirit liked to steal coins from tables and would then throw them at the staff. The flying coins became so much of a problem that the landlords forbid loose change to be stored anywhere other than the locked till due to fears of windows being smashed. But that's not all. Full-body apparitions of women in Victorian dress have been seen sitting patiently in the corners of the pub, thought to be a couple of the pub's long-dead sex workers who once used to haunt the place when they were alive, hanging around in a similar fashion after they're dead. Some male patrons have also said they've seen women leaning over the staircase by the men's toilets, but when they've tried to speak to them, they turn and disappear. But what's the actual proof behind these hauntings, apart from eyewitness reports? Well, some ghost hunters have recorded voices in the bar talking when no one is in the room, and drastic temperature changes have also been recorded in isolated parts of the building, seemingly moving around from place to place. It seems that somehow the one-time locals refuse to let go of this place, and it seems to be a sponge for the memory of the dead who can't move on. The building itself survived the Blitz, something which sadly couldn't be said for a lot of Whitechapel. If you step into this pub, you can tell the building is thankful it's still here. It's been charmed by those who have sought refuge inside, had one too many wild nights out, and overall the atmosphere is good. In the darker corners, you can tell that the space is still shared, whether that be with the spirits of the undead, or just the overflowing social history which has slipped between the floorboards. Nowadays, it's hard to go to the 10 Bells and it not be entirely full of after-work pint drinkers, tourists wanting to revel in its authentic charm, and just locals who prop up the bar, much like patrons have been doing for centuries. However, there can still be some quiet moments found, particularly in the upstairs bar on the creaky, dark staircases, which feel like they shouldn't be for the public, and the sash windows still rattle on a windy day. The building busy chattering its teeth when it's cold outside. But in those pin drop moments, you can tell that this building exceeds the boundaries of time. It's a portal, a pin on a map for many lost souls, and somehow they keep coming back here and will probably stay here for eternity. Hell, I may even choose to haunt there long after I'm gone. So if that's the case, and 50 years from now, a new ghost story emerges of a woman sidling up to patrons to ask them if they want to hear a spooky story, it's probably me. So is this the most haunted boozer in the whole of the East End? Maybe, maybe not. But it sure does have a lot of history in its walls. And if I see it in there, mine's a pint of lager. Oh, and an extra rubbery pickled egg and a packet of salt and vinegar. Thanks for joining me for this extra special spooky episode of Macabre London. Let me know what your thoughts were about that episode on Spotify or my social media, and if you've ever had a ghostly encounter yourself. And if you don't have any thoughts or theories, but you've made it this far and you just want to let me know you're a true part of the Ghoul Gang, then please leave me the bell emoji in the comments on YouTube or Spotify in honour of the 10 Bells Pub. And if you want to join me for the post-episode discussion, make sure you head to Patreon for Podmortem, the new show after the show, where I delve into more of my research and my theories around what's happened. And there's a few on there already that you're not going to want to miss. So join my exclusive community on Patreon to hear my hot takes along with early and ad-free episodes by heading to patreon.com/Macabre London. A big thanks to my amazing top-tier Patreon producers, Beck, Christina, Christoph, Heather's Leg, Lisa, Mary, Matilda, Ravel, Sally, Sam, Sarah, Terry and Veronica, and all of our other fantastic patrons too. If you want your name read out in the episodes or listed in the show notes, join us on Patreon. I'd love to personally welcome you to the Ghoul Gang and have a natter about the latest episodes. Don't forget to head to wolfescapegames.com and use my code MACABRE30 to get your special discount code of 30% off. Thanks for joining me for another macabre tale from the city's past. I've been Nikki Druce. Remember to stay especially spooky this Halloween season, and I'll see you ghouls next time for another ghost story. Ooh.